This is Hunter Lehman with Sportable, and you are listening to the Six Wheels Consulting Podcast with Matthew Shapiro.
Sweet.
Welcome to the Sixth Wheels Consulting Podcast, dialoguing disability and discussing difference, inclusion, and all abilities in today's world. Now here are your hosts, Matthew Shapiro and Bob Nolly.
Hey there, welcome back. Hey, it's Bob Nolly here. I'm here with Matthew. And today, we're going to go back to the second part of our interview with Evelyn Clark. If you missed episode number 28, go back and pick that up. Evelyn's been with us. She is a law student at Washington Lee here in Virginia. And she suffered a spinal injury that put her in a wheelchair. And she is moving through life now, and she's sharing with us her legal perspectives that she did in the last episode. And today, Matthew talks to her about her own personal story and what her feelings are now.
Right. And while I love talking about the law, and I think it's very fascinating, I also want to hear like your story, right? And so and want to get your perspectives again from being somebody who was able-bodied, and I've known you as both, right? I knew you as an able-bodied individual, and then you and I have met up on a couple of occasions and had dinner, and I've seen you in your chair, and I've seen you with your crutches. And so, like, in that transition period, like, what has been – so this is going to kind of be – there's a good and a bad side to this. So what has been, like, the most exciting thing for you as a person with a disability as you've sort of transitioned into that life, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I really love that question because it's so easy for people with spinal cord injuries to focus on what they've lost.
Sure.
But I definitely look at what I've gained every day. You know, it was tough. I want to do a quick shout out for when I was in my time in the hospital, my family at USDA Rural Development. I was in the Richmond office, but people from all over the state sent me packages. My church community from home, everyone in Martinsville, Roanoke College, Mac and Bob's, the restaurant where I worked, everyone was just really, really supportive and rallied around me, and it meant a lot. Sure. So it definitely made that transition easier to have a support system. I think definitely a positive is my family and I are much closer now. I think, going through this kind of traumatic event, you realize what's important, and, family is always going to be there. My mom's there helping me wipe my butt when I poop the bed, and so like things you wouldn't expect to do with your 22 or 23-year-old daughter that
Sure.
You just have to grin and bear it and then laugh about it later. I think that
90% of my life too is my mom and I, my family and I will have tons of instances where you're just like, what the heck just happened? But then you can just laugh about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of bowel and bladder excretion stories, in public. Yes. And, I also just I appreciate life so much more than I ever did before the accident.
I'm reading something that you wrote that you passed on to Matthew, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's a personal note or just a journal entry or an essay that you did, but one thing you did say in there, you have such incredible gratitude now because you are still so incredibly mobile, especially comparing yourself to some of your friends back in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So, I think you have a thought here that from day one after the accident, you really just kept rolling forward, as we say in our
right. And it's hard to look at people and say, well, it could always be worse. But I mean, I had cervical fractures, so I was very fortunate that I didn't, break my neck, and I'm not a quadriplegic. I'm a paraplegic. I have full use of my hands and arms, and so, I wake up in the morning now, and I'm just like, hey, I can dress myself. I can eat on my own. I can brush my teeth. I'm living pretty much independently. My mom comes up every week or 2 weeks and helps me do laundry and clean the apartment and meal prep and cook for me. But I can live day to day on my own, which is an incredible thing. And honestly, before this,
that's, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but even for me, that's more than what I can say, which is even more awesome for you too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but that's never something I would say before the accident. You know, a normal 22-year-old, never even broken a bone. I would never get up and say, hey, I can dress myself. That is an absolute blessing. And I'm grateful for that. But,
Right.
you know, when you sit down on the toilet to pee and weep with gratitude that you can urinate on your own, I think it kind of changes your life perspective a little.
Very, very much so. So, okay. So the reverse of that, and the reverse of that question, what has been like the most challenging thing and, or, you know, I guess eye-opening thing from certain, I don't want to say a negative perspective, but something that like you weren't expecting, or I mean, if you want to say negative, you can say negative, but what has been kind of that biggest challenge for you?
I think that there's just a constant process of grief and grieving what you could do before and what you will probably never be able to do again. I mean, I used to love hiking. I went to Roanoke College, and we've got so many great hiking destinations. And I mean, even it'll just sometimes hit me if I'm driving down the road and someone's at a crosswalk and I see them do that kind of fast jog to hurry and get across. And I'm like, you know, I miss doing that.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it gets better every day. I think my 1 year anniversary probably hit the hardest, where I was still living at home and still could not do a lot of stuff. And so I couldn't foresee the point where I was independent and I could live on my own. And my mom kept talking to me, you know, the weeks leading up to it. She was like, you know, your anniversary is coming up. Do you want to talk about it? How do you feel? Because, you know, people in the SCI community make a really big deal of that. And I was like, I mean, it's just another day. It's not any different. I'm still in a wheelchair. I'm still, you know, this is still my life. It's no other day.
Right.
And then I woke up that day and it really hit that a year ago today, I was just walking around completely able-bodied and had no second thought of that. And I just bawled my eyes out for about 2 days.
Yeah. Didn't you post about that on Facebook too? Because
yes.
When I saw your post.
Yeah, I just straight up posted a picture of me ugly crying on Facebook.
We all ugly cry. It's okay.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think I've been a lot more open after the accident, because I feel like people don't share those parts of their lives. Everything's just got this kind of rose-colored Instagram filter where everything's great and you're vacationing and life is wonderful. Yeah. But sometimes life isn't wonderful, and I think we should be able to share that.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And to that, like I always talk about, and I'm sure I've referenced it here on the podcast a number of times, is like, look, I tend to be an open book, right? And if anyone, now granted, you and I are in different spots, and I think that's what makes this conversation so unique. And why I really wanted to do it too was because like this is all I've known my entire life, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I am definitely in a different place than you are, or anyone else who experiences a spinal cord injury. And so, but like I also respect everyone's like process and everything that they have to go to, but that's why I also try to be granted, I don't know life with the spinal cord injury, but I do know life as a person with a disability and all of the frankly like bullshit that we put up with mm-hmm. on a day-to-day basis. So I try to offer my like level of expertise, or not expertise, but I just try to be a resource and a support so that like, you know, people can reach out to me and ask me questions. So, you know, and you've done that on a number of occasions, and I appreciate that really a lot.
Yeah. And I've thought a lot about if I were to just be, you know, born in a disabled body versus becoming disabled, and what would be more difficult, or, you know, difficult may not be the word, but just what that experience would be like. And I think, you know, I put this in my note I wrote to you, that I think that one difference is that I lived 22 years with incredible able-bodied privilege. And all through growing up and all through school, I was told that I could do anything or be anything and have all these opportunities. And it's something that I look back and say, you know, I don't know if people would have told me this if I weren't in a wheelchair growing up, or if I had a disability growing up. And And so I think I still kind of internalize that where, you should be saying the same thing to yourself, but I'm saying I could do all this stuff before being disabled, and I'm going to be able to do it now. Just because I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean I'm any different. And so I think it's just different that I have that validation in myself that my abilities haven't changed just because I sit and roll in a chair to get around.
Right.
And, but that it might be, I don't want to say more difficult, but just different for you to say, I can do anything an able-bodied person can do,
right?
Intellectually, which you can, but I feel like society hasn't told you that.
That's a really interesting point. And to your example of like hiking, right? Mm-hmm. Like there, and I think Bob, we've talked about this on the show too, but like there's an off-road wheelchair power chair that would allow you to hike because I have done it, right? Like there are things that we might not think that we're able to do, but I guarantee you in most cases, like tomorrow I'm not going to wake up and be a surgeon, right? But like there is a disabled surgeon, but like I also have like appropriate expectations, right? Like I wouldn't expect to be a surgeon, but that's not to say like if I wanted to be, like, I don't think there's really anything preventing me from doing that. But, I think that is where having being honest with yourself and like having that conversation on the regular with yourself, with your family, with your friends, really sort of keeps you grounded, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think
go ahead. I stepped on you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just can't help but think that because you had 22 years in an able body and you kept that thought, you internalized that thought, I can do whatever I want to, whatever I want to chase. Right. That really gets hardwired into your psyche, into your value system, at least. And I can't speak to it, but after the accident, you're going, okay, it's just another problem set to solve. How do I solve that?
And to add to that, Bob, if I may, and then Evelyn, I'll let you respond too. Like, I also think that's wired into you based on your upbringing, right? Because like, I know that, Evelyn, my mom, you've met my mom on a number of occasions, like, and my family has been such a support system that like, they'll do whatever we have to do for me to go on a trip or like, have bent over backwards. And so like that mindset has been wired into me from the start. And it sounds like with the support of your family and your sister and your mom and all of your family, like that's sort of been the way it's worked for you. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't know, on that same vein, I think the hardest part of becoming disabled is handling social situations. Yes. And it was really weird getting to law school where it's like, all these people know is wheelchair Evelyn. They didn't know me before. And not to say I'm any different, but it definitely was an adjustment going to school and being that person in a wheelchair. And that is your identity. And that's how people think of you. And, going out to the grocery store and gas station and people treat you completely differently. And I think that people are mainly good at heart, but can come off very insensitive.
Has they talked to you like you were 5 yet?
Yes. Oh yes. And
happens all the time.
When you talked about your mom on a previous podcast and the look of there, but for the grace of God go I, that's such a good way to put it because everyone just looks at you and they're just like, oh, I can't imagine that would never be me. That would never be my family and really pity me. But I just want to yell at him and be like, you have no idea how good I've got it. And
that quote
amazing
that you said
my life is.
Your common statement that people say to you was, I know exactly what you're going through. I broke my foot 5 months ago and I could barely get in the building. And I could see you just like mentally smirking and, and going, yeah, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. For the most part, I kind of say, oh yeah, because they're like, you're going to get there. I know exactly what you're going through. You're going to heal. You're going to be perfectly fine. And so, for the most part, I'm like, oh, all right, thank you. And move on. But sometimes I'm like, well, no, I'm paralyzed and this is permanent. It's been 3 years. Like, thanks for your concern. just random people in the grocery store that diagnose, and I'm sure they're trying to make me feel better, but it can definitely get exhausting.
Well, because they have the perception that you and I aren't successful even with our disabilities, but little do they know, like, you're in law school, you're kicking ass in law school. I'm just doing a business. I'm doing all this stuff, and like, so yeah, they have that, but that perception is like complete crap.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a lot of it is, when I'm out getting groceries, by myself, I can go in and use my chair or use the little, electric cart and go around. And
love that scooter.
I would never ask someone what's wrong with them.
Right.
And I get that constantly.
Who do you get that from the most?
A lot of times it's the older generation who, because I'm young, they, I guess, maybe feel grandmotherly or motherly and feel like they can intrude. But I almost joined a Y in Lexington because it had a lot more accessible equipment than our school gym. Yeah. And I just couldn't do it because I could not be there for more than 15 minutes without having 4 different people ask what was wrong, ask about my diagnosis, ask about my progress, and then give their own diagnosis and just kind of ramble on. And, I said this in my note as well, that I have kind of a different view. I know you enjoy interacting with people in public and educating them and taking that opportunity to make people feel comfortable with it. Yeah. And I did that a lot in the beginning of my injury, where I was really excited to talk to people and express that, this just happened. I'm newly disabled. This could happen to you at any point in time. This is a spinal cord injury. This is, quote, what's wrong with me. And I just found that it was more, like you would say, it was more tragedy porn or inspiration porn, where they didn't actually care about me or my physical disability or how that would apply to them. It was more so just morbid curiosity about what was wrong with me.
Sure.
So if I see you in the store and you're in the little scooter in your chair, and I'm just walking down the aisle, and I stop at the same section looking at the soup or something, wherever we are there, and I stop and I see you looking upward, and I ask you, can I reach something for you? Are you offended by that? Have I done the wrong thing there?
Absolutely not. Okay. I would say, yeah, I'm reaching for those chickpeas right there.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
There you go.
But I'm thinking I've been feeding people left over right for months.
And Bob, okay. I wouldn't be offended by that either. Like, just to give the other side of that too, because I think one of the things, and Evelyn, I'll let you get back and answer. I'm sorry I jumped in, but like, one of the things I always say to people is like, just ask. Like, just ask and don't make an assumption that like Evelyn or I need help, right? But what you can do is ask, and then if we say no thank you, also don't be like super offended by that either, right? Because there are a lot of people who, Evelyn, I'm sure you're one of them, is fairly independent and can do a lot of things. So like, when people ask to offer assistance and then the person is like, no, thank you, I appreciate it, but no, thank you. Like they're like, what? Like,
yeah, I'm sure you've heard all the crazies. I'm sure you've both heard them.
Absolutely.
Between the two.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, so let me just toss this out on the floor for a little bit. I was going to ask the religion question, but I'm going to set that aside for a minute because, Matthew, every time you and I start talking about dating, you and I twice have just started laughing at each other because I think, well, never mind. Well, I'm laughing, but I'm laughing about the worst things I've ever had. But we don't just have a woman here tonight. We have a lady here tonight, and perhaps she can weigh in not on her experiences but just what her thought patterns were as she moved through relationships. After the accident. And
again, is it different, right? Like, and ultimately, like, that's where, like, the questions are going to be derived from. Because again, you were doing the dating thing as an able-bodied person, and how has that changed for you as somebody who is now a wheelchair user?
Yeah, I think. So I get there's a lot of discussions about this on all the SCI Facebooks and whether or not to post, because let's be real, everyone's online dating, everyone's on Tinder or Bumble or Hinge is the new one, I guess.
I've never heard of half of these.
Yeah. So it's always, are you going to post yourself in the chair? And then the different responses. And a lot of people are like, well, if they don't want to be with you in a chair, then they're not a person worth, dating and not worth talking to. I think it's pretty important to post who you are online. And I think online dating, a large part of that relies on people presenting their true self. And, if I like to sit at home and read every night, I'm not going to post that I love going clubbing and to EDM shows. And so if I'm online dating, I am going to post me in the wheelchair. What I've gone back and forth on is what to say about it, if anything at all. Sometimes, my profile would just say, WNL law student. Sometimes it would say, the chair is new. It doesn't factor in my life. So, don't let it factor your swipe. And then, I like that. I like that. Because it's not, it's not a factor. It's just my life. And so, to a degree, I understand people to a degree, I can understand people not wanting to swipe right just because they're scared. They've never met anyone in a wheelchair. They don't know about it. Right. And so I can kind of get that hesitation, but, I've also gotten on the other side where people will swipe right and match and immediately go, why are you in a wheelchair? What happened? Explain everything.
Right. Like that's like their first question.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Cause I know for me, like dating is it, like, I've always said that is probably the only void that is within me right now. Like my career is great. I've got great friends, great family, but I don't necessarily have that significant other, right? If anyone's listening and thinks of interest, please hit me up. I would appreciate it.
I'm not that kind of producer.
Okay. But yeah, for me, that has been one of my more frustrating struggles. But I certainly hear everything you're saying too, because like that is a constant debate I have within myself is like, how open am I about the fact that like I'm in a chair, fortunately or unfortunately for you, I don't know how we would put it, but like you can use your crutches, right? But where for me, like my six wheels travel with me wherever I go, right? I got this machine strapped to my ass on a 24/7 basis.
Right.
And so, I can try and get around that, but like, to your point, I think that's being completely ungenuine towards somebody who may be interested. And that's like setting up the relationship on a very negative foot from the jump. So it's like, it's a constant topic that I know I wrestle with regularly.
When you made the comment about folks that swiped right and wanted the full debrief right away on what happened and what the full story was, boy, I sound coming off like a leadership, a relationship coach here. But I'm thinking,
Bob, you have a new podcast idea.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now I can produce like 5 or 6. Oh my gosh, I'll take all this out. Don't worry. I'm thinking the value in your relationship. Whether you may not see it in the teenage years for sure, and it may be a while before you see it, but just being able to appreciate somebody that doesn't feel the need to jump into the silence. And I use the metaphor of sitting on the front porch together, whether it's today in our 20s or 30s in a beautiful afternoon, or in the silver years when you're much older, but just being able to sit there together and not be scared of the silence. I just think that's a totally adult skill.
Right.
It's something we grow at some point to appreciate a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you get so many of the messages about the chair, and even if people wait to, exchange pleasantries, then they're like, so what happened? And then you kind of almost become wary of the people that don't mention it at all.
Right. Do you not see my chair? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So then, a couple of times I've if I talk to someone a few days, I've been like, so you haven't mentioned, the wheelchair, and they have just been like, well, it would just be my own morbid curiosity and not, it's not relevant.
Yeah.
So that's, I really appreciate that. I did start
refreshing.
I think I went on a couple dates probably too early. Really like a year and a half after my accident, I went on a date, and I was just like, oh, I'm not ready for this at all. I was just like not at all comfortable in myself and my place in life, and was still really wrestling with my identity, that I was not ready to open up or share that with anyone or listen to anyone else's problems, because I was just like, your problems are so trivial. Like, don't even, and if I was having a bad day, no one who's able-bodied is going to be able to relate and sympathize to the level that I needed that.
Right.
And so I was just like, that would not be fair to me. It would not be fair to them. That even friends, a couple times, if I was having a really rough time that first year and a half and first starting to live on my own and things were hard, and they would just be like, well, I try to focus on the positives in life. Like, I have a job, I've got a roof over my head. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that would normally work, but like,
you still have to deal with the negative. Like, you still have to deal with the negatives. Like, yeah, I've dealt with that too. Like, because there's plenty of times where, like, I know I have all the positives, but there's plenty of times where I'm laying in bed at night and I'm like, some of those negatives do tend to creep in. So I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, that's some heavy lifting. Lifting.
Oh my goodness. Many, many thanks to Evelyn Clark for sharing her story today. We're not done with Evelyn yet. She'll be back next week to talk a little bit more about the societal perspectives of her experience. Everyone, thank you for listening to the Six Wheels Consulting Disability Podcast. This is Bob Nolly for Matthew Shapiro. Think inclusion, and keep rolling forward. We'll see you next week.